having so much. You look around the city and you see people living in tenements or under bridges. You think of the nice warm bed that you have, or the solid roof keeping the rain out. Or you look around the world and you see that people are eating less in a week than what you throw away after every meal. Or maybe it's really even closer to home. Maybe you find that you write a larger check to AT&T than you do to the church each month. Do you ever feel that kind of guilt? I do. King David did as well. King David looked at his magnificent home, which was made of cedar, we're told. It was a pretty prized wood, an expensive wood. He looked around and he saw all that God had given him as the king of Israel. A little shepherd boy to king of this mighty nation. And God was still living in a tent. The Ark of the Covenant, the mercy seat of God, was still being kept in the same tent, presumably the same tent, or maybe it was another one, but it was still a tent. The same one that had been taken on their travels out of Egypt, had been round in the wilderness, had been sitting there now for, maybe around 450 years or so since the Exodus. So David, he came up with a new plan. He announced to the prophet Nathan, sort of his spiritual consigliere, he's going to build the Lord a house, a magnificent house of gold and cedar. And by golly, Nathan thought that was an outstanding idea. But Nathan had not bothered to ask the Lord. How many times have you done that? How many times have you come up with the best idea since sliced bread and taken off with it? I know I have. Pursued it off down the path without once even asking the Lord what he might think about it. You know, he really does have some pretty valuable insights. And he is more than happy to help us with advice if we just stop and ask and open his word and read. But what he knows better than any pastor knows. Unsought advice is almost never heeded. Pastors all hear from their wives many times, "You should tell him this." It just does no good, because unsought advice is almost never heeded. Well, you heard what the Lord had to say to Nathan when Nathan suggested that they're going to have a house made of cedar for him. The Lord said, "I don't need a house made of cedar. I don't need a palace of precious gold and jewels for that matter. Because the Lord is not like the gods of the Canaanites. He's not like the gods of the Egyptians. He's not made of physical materials. He needs no physical place to dwell. No, see, the Lord's place is with his people. Wherever his people are, he will be in the midst of them, and there he will be at home with them." Later on, he would have David's son Solomon build him a temple just for a short time, because that temple didn't last long. It was destroyed by the Babylonians just a short time later. See, God's true dwelling place, his final dwelling place, his best dwelling place is what we hear about in the gospel on this fourth Sunday in Advent. By the way, this is why the fourth Sunday in Advent is so important. A lot of churches are skipping the fourth Sunday in Advent because, by golly, it falls on the same day as Christmas Eve, and we just can't have church 4 times on a day. You know, the world might come to a screeching halt. You gotta have the fourth Sunday in Advent because it's so important. The gospel that you heard today was the Annunciation, the coming of Christ, Emmanuel. That's the Hebrew word. It means God with us. Emmanuel. That's It's what the prophet Isaiah called Jesus. Jesus, the second person of the Holy Trinity, has existed as God forever. He was there at the creation of the world. He was also there when his creation fell into sin. And he came to be with us when he became flesh, born of the Virgin Mary. He came to be with us in a way that no God ever had in any human system. Having become flesh, he gave his flesh and blood in the sacrament of the altar, where we eat and drink his body and blood each time we gather. Through that holy sacrament, God now dwells in his true temple. He dwells in all of us. That's the miracle that we celebrate tomorrow night and Monday. See, if we don't have Advent 4, we haven't set up the miracle. See, tomorrow night at Christmas Eve services is when we celebrate when God's promise to King David was ultimately fulfilled. King David was feeling a little guilty because his house was so much nicer than the Lord's. But as usual, the Lord has a plan that far surpasses anything that we can imagine. God says to King David, hey, what if instead of a cedar house, I dwell inside you, David? How would that be? How would it be if God in all of his glory took up residence inside you? That is exactly what we have. Now, there are some times when that reality becomes a little uncomfortable. I tell the kids in the youth group all the time to always behave as though Jesus is sitting right beside them, because he is. In fact, he's in them. Sometimes, honestly, we'd prefer if God could go live somewhere else for a little while. Sometimes when we want to speak badly about someone, God is a pain. Because it is just no fun dragging somebody's reputation through the mud when he's sitting there on our mental couch giving us that look. Reminding us that he's there listening to every word we say. And watching vulgar movies, that's just no fun at all. Remembering that everything we're seeing, he's seeing. Everything we're hearing, he's hearing. But as uncomfortable as it may be, it is far more comforting to know that we never have to go someplace to find our God. We never have to recite certain mantras or offer certain sacrifices, do certain things in order to find our God. He's right here with us, in us. During the good times, and even more so when we slog through the bad times. The greatest miracle of Christmas is that our God became flesh and dwelt among us. And then he died on a cross and rose again from the dead, so that he was able not to just dwell among us, but in us, through his body and blood in that holy sacrament. God is truly one with us right now. And he remains one with us all the way into eternity. He will never leave us. He will never forsake us. And he will usher each one of us through the gates of heaven into eternity. And there is no greater gift than that at Christmas.